There are moments in life that break you, moments that reach so deep into your chest, they don't just hurt your heart, they rearrange it. They change the shape of who you are. And on one cold evening in November, standing on the front porch of the house I grew up in, holding a garbage bag stuffed with whatever clothes I could grab, I had one of those moments. My father stood in the doorway. My mother was behind him, arms crossed, and with a voice I will never forget, steady, cold, and final, my father looked me in the eyes and said, "You are no longer part of this family. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't write. As far as we're concerned, you don't exist." The door closed, not slammed, not thrown shut in anger. It closed slowly, deliberately, like they were sealing a coffin. And in many ways, they were. They were burying me. Not my body, but my identity, my name, my place at the dinner table, everything. I was 20 years old. I stood on that porch for maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. I don't really remember. What I do remember is the sound, the deadbolt locking from the inside, that small click, that tiny metallic sound that told me this wasn't a fight. This wasn't a cool off and come back tomorrow situation. This was permanent. Now, I know you're probably wondering, what could a 20-year-old possibly do to get completely disowned by their entire family? Was it something unforgivable? Was it criminal? Was it dangerous? No, it was a choice, a simple life choice, one that millions of people make every single day. But in my family, in my household, it was treated like a betrayal of the highest order. Let me take you back. Let me show you who these people were, and let me show you the world I grew up in so you understand why what happened next changed everything. My name, for the purpose of this story, is Daniel. I grew up in a mid-sized town in the Midwest. Traditional family, church every Sunday, strict rules. My father, Richard, was a respected man in our community. He was an accountant, precise, controlled, the kind of man who scheduled every hour of his day and expected the same from everyone in his house. My mother, Evelyn, was a homemaker, loving in her way, but never once in my life did she challenge my father on anything. Not once. And then there was Marcus, my younger brother, 4 years younger than me, the golden child, the pride and joy, the one who could do no wrong. Now don't get me wrong. I loved Marcus. I still do. He was my little brother. I taught him how to ride a bike. I walked him to school when he was scared on his first day. I helped him with homework when my parents were busy. I was his protector, his role model. At least, that's what I thought I was. But in our family, there was an unwritten rule, a code that no one ever said out loud, but everyone understood. You follow the path. You go to the college your father picks. You study what your father approves. You work where your father says. You marry who your father deems appropriate, and you never, ever step outside the line. Marcus followed the line perfectly. Honor student, star of the debate team. Accepted into a prestigious university that my father had donated to. Everything my parents wanted. And me? I wanted something different. I wanted to be an artist, a designer. I was good with my hands, good with visuals, good with creating things out of nothing. I spent hours drawing, designing logos, and building mock-ups of brand identities. I dreamed of starting my own creative agency one day. I didn't want to be an accountant. I didn't want to sit behind a desk pushing numbers. I wanted to build. I wanted to create. And the day I told my father that I was dropping out of the business program he had enrolled me in, the program at his alma mater, the program he was paying for, that was the day the war began. But the disownment? That didn't come right away. No, it came later, after a series of escalating conflicts, after months of arguments, guilt trips, silent treatments, and manipulation. It came after I made a decision that, in his eyes, was the final insult. I enrolled in art school, on my own, with financial aid and a part-time job, without his permission, without his money, without his approval, and that was unforgivable. The months leading up to that night on the porch were brutal. My father didn't yell at first. That's not how he operated. Richard was a man of precision, remember? He didn't explode. He dismantled it, slowly, word by word. He would sit me down at the dining table, the same table where we ate Sunday dinners, and he would calmly, almost surgically, tell me why I was making the worst mistake of my life. Artists don't make money, Daniel. Artists starve. Artists beg. Is that what you want? To beg? My mother would nod along, silent, always silent. And Marcus was just a teenager at the time, 16. He didn't say much, but I could see it in his eyes. Confusion, maybe even fear. That's because if this could happen to me, the older brother, it could happen to him too. So he kept his head down and kept getting straight A's. I tried reasoning with my father. I showed him data. The design industry was booming. I showed him portfolios of successful designers making six figures. I showed him my own work, logos I'd designed, branding projects I'd done for small businesses in exchange for practice. Some of them were genuinely excellent. Even a professor at the business school had told me I had raw talent. My father looked at all of it, and then he said something that burned a permanent mark on my soul. Talent without obedience is worthless. That sentence, that one sentence. It told me everything I needed to know about how he saw me. I wasn't his son in that moment. I was a subordinate, an employee who had gone off script. And in his world, there was only one consequence for that. Things escalated quickly after that. He canceled my meal plan at the university, told me if I wanted to play artist, I could feed myself. My mother stopped making my lunch, something she'd done every single day for as long as I can remember. Small things, petty things, but things designed to send a message. Fall in line, or lose everything. I didn't fall in line. I got a second job. I worked at a print shop during the day and a coffee house at night. I applied for every scholarship and grant I could find. I cut my expenses down to almost nothing. I ate rice and canned soup most days. But I kept going. I enrolled in the design program at a local college, not prestigious, not fancy, but it had a good program and professors who actually believed in their students. And when my father found out, when he saw the enrollment confirmation letter I'd accidentally left on the kitchen counter, that was the night. That was the night he told me to pack my things. My mother stood behind him and said nothing. Not a single word. Not wait. Not let's talk about this. Not he's your son. Nothing. Marcus was upstairs. I could see the light on in his room. His shadow moved past the window as I walked down the driveway. He was watching. But he didn't come down. He didn't open the window. He didn't call out. And I didn't blame him. He was 16. He was scared. He was surviving. Just like I had been surviving for years under that roof. But here's what hurt the most. And I want you to really hear this. because this is the part that changed who I was as a person. It wasn't the disownment itself. It wasn't being thrown out. It wasn't the loss of money or the loss of a home. It was the silence. The absolute, devastating silence from every single person in that family. No one fought for me. No one said, "This is wrong." No uncle called. No aunt reached out. No cousin sent a message. My father must have told them his version of the story, and they all accepted it. Like I was a stain they needed to pretend didn't exist. I went from being part of a family to being completely alone. In one night, I slept in my car that first week, a beat-up Honda Civic that I'd bought with my own money from the print shop job. I showered at the gym. I kept going to class. I kept showing up to work. And every single night before I closed my eyes in the back seat of that car, I made myself a promise. One day they will see. One day they will know. One day I will stand in front of them, not begging, not broken, but standing tall. And they will realize what they threw away. That promise kept me alive. The next 4 years of my life were the hardest and the most defining careers I've ever lived. After sleeping in my car for nearly 3 weeks, a classmate named Jordan noticed something was off. I was always the first one in the computer lab, always the last one to leave. I never talked about going home. I never invited anyone over. And one day, Jordan just asked me straight up, "Daniel, are you sleeping in your car?" I lied at first, said no, said I was fine. But Jordan wasn't stupid. He saw the folded blankets in my back seat. He saw the toothbrush in the cup holder. And instead of judging me, he offered me his couch. That couch became my base camp for the next 6 months. Jordan didn't charge me rent. He just asked that I help with groceries when I could. And I did. Every time. Even when it meant eating less myself. During those 6 months, something started to shift. My work in the design program caught the attention of a professor named Dr. Lena Watts. She was tough. She didn't hand out compliments like candy. But one afternoon, after class, she pulled me aside and said something that changed the trajectory of my entire life. "Daniel, your work has something most students' work doesn't. It has hunger, it hurts, and it has purpose. Don't let anyone take that away from you." She connected me with a freelance opportunity. A local restaurant needed a full rebrand. Logo, menu design, signage, the whole thing. They couldn't pay much, $500 for the entire project. But I poured everything into it. Every ounce of skill I had, every late night, every lesson I'd learned. When I delivered the final package, the restaurant owner, a woman named Gloria, looked at it and started crying. She said it was exactly what she had imagined but could never describe. She told 3 other business owners about me, and just like that, word started to spread. Within a year, I had a small client list. Nothing huge. Bakeries, barber shops, a local gym, a few online stores. But I was earning. Real money. Enough to move out of Jordan's apartment with deep, deep gratitude and into my own small studio. I kept going to school. Graduated with honors, top of my class. And on the day I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I looked out into the audience and saw rows of proud parents, cheering families, siblings holding signs. My row was empty. Not a single member of my family was there. No one called, no one texted. The silence was still alive, still loud, still suffocating. But I held that diploma tight, and I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning." And I meant it. After graduation, I threw myself into building my agency. I called it Ember Creative because embers are what's left after a fire. They're small, they're quiet, but they can reignite everything. I worked 18-hour days. I pitched to bigger clients. I entered design competitions. I networked at every event I could find. I taught myself web development, motion graphics, and brand strategy, all through free online resources and sheer determination. By year 2, Ember Creative had 5 employees. By year 3, we had an office. By year 4, the year everything changed, we had landed a contract with a national retail brand that put us on the map. I was 24 years old, and my little agency was doing over $1 million in annual revenue. I didn't live lavishly. I drove the same car. Yes, the same Honda Civic. I rented a modest apartment. I saved aggressively because I remembered what it felt like to have nothing. And I swore I would never be in that position again. But here's the thing about success. When you build it in silence, when no one sees the struggle, when no one witnesses the sleepless nights and the empty chairs, it feels incomplete. Like you won a race, but nobody saw you cross the finish line. And that feeling, that incompleteness, is what led to the plan. The plan that would change everything. In the plan that started with a single envelope that arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, it was an invitation to Marcus's college graduation. I stared at that envelope for a long time. It was cream-colored, thick cardstock, embossed lettering, very formal, very Richard. On the front it said, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the graduation of Marcus Allen Richardson." There was no personal note, no handwritten message, just the printed invitation with the date, time, and location. For a moment, just a brief, flickering moment, I felt something warm. Hope, maybe. Like maybe this was an olive branch. Maybe Marcus had asked them to send it. Maybe this was his way of saying, "I want you there." But then I noticed something. The envelope was addressed to current resident, not Daniel, not my name, just current resident. And that warmth turned cold fast. I later found out, through a mutual acquaintance from our old neighborhood, that the invitations had been sent to a wide mailing list. Family, friends, neighbors, colleagues of my father. Hundreds of them. I was on the list by accident. My address was in the system because Marcus, at some point, must have looked me up. But the invitation wasn't personal. It was mass-produced. Still, I had it. And now I had a decision to make. Do I go? Do I show up to a family event where I was told, in no uncertain terms, that I no longer exist? Do I walk into a room full of people who erased me, who never once reached out, who let a 20-year-old sleep in his car without a second thought? Every logical part of my brain said no, don't go. You owe them nothing. You've built your life without them. You're successful. You're stable. You're strong. Why go back to a place that only brought you pain? But there was another part of me, a quieter part, the part that still missed Sunday dinners, the part that still remembered teaching Marcus how to tie his shoes, the part that remembered Marcus's shadow in the window that night, watching me walk away. That part of me said, go, not for them, for Marcus, and for yourself. But I wasn't going to show up empty-handed, and I wasn't going to show up small. I had a plan, a surprise, something that would make a statement louder than any words I could ever say. I started preparing. I had 3 weeks until the graduation ceremony, and in those 3 weeks, I was going to put together something that no one in that auditorium would ever forget. Was it revenge? I'm not going to lie. Part of it was. Part of me wanted my father to see me, really see me. Not the failure he predicted, not the starving artist he mocked, but the man I had become, the man he tried to erase. But the bigger part, the part that kept me up at night, refining every detail, was love. Love for my little brother, the brother who never called, yes. The brother who never reached out, yes. But also, the brother who was 16 and scared. The brother who was surviving under the same roof that crushed me. The brother who maybe, just maybe, needed to see that there was life beyond that house, beyond those rules, beyond that man's approval. So I made my plan, and I set it in motion. Graduation day arrived on a warm Saturday in May. Clear sky, bright sun, the kind of day that feels like it was designed for new beginnings. I pulled into the parking lot of the university's event center. I didn't drive the Honda Civic that day, not because I wanted to show off, but because I'd finally let an employee convince me to lease something more professional for client meetings. It was a clean, dark-colored SUV, nothing flashy, but it was mine, earned, paid for. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before going in. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the weight of what was about to happen. 4 years of silence were about to be broken, and I didn't know how it would end. I wore a simple navy suit, clean, well-fitted. I'd gotten a fresh haircut the day before. I looked different, not like the 20-year-old they threw out. I was broader, sharper. There was something in my eyes that hadn't been there before, a steadiness that only comes from surviving things you weren't supposed to survive. I walked into the venue. The auditorium was massive, hundreds of seats, families everywhere. Laughter, photos, flowers, balloons, the energy of pride and celebration filling every corner. And then I saw them. Third row from the front. My father is in a pressed gray suit. My mother is in a floral dress. They were seated with a few relatives, my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle Gene. Everyone looked polished. Everyone looked perfect. The Richardson family on display, as always. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't sit near them. I found a seat several rows back, on the far side of the auditorium, close enough to see, far enough to not be noticed. At least not yet. And the ceremony began. Speeches, music, the procession of graduates in their caps and gowns, name after name called, applause after applause. And then, Marcus Allen Richardson. My little brother walked across that stage, tall, confidence, honors cords around his neck. The audience clapped. My father stood up. My mother raised her phone to take a photo. The family cheered, and I clapped too, quietly, from my seat in the back. Tears I didn't expect rolling down my face, because despite everything, despite the silence, the abandonment, the pain, I was proud of him, genuinely proud. The ceremony ended. Families flooded into the lobby for the reception. There were refreshment tables, a photo area with the university backdrop, and clusters of graduates hugging their loved ones. This was the moment. And I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Not cream-colored, not embossed, just a plain white envelope. But what was inside it was anything but plain. I walked through the crowd. My legs felt heavy. Every step closer to that family was like walking through wet concrete. But I kept moving, because I had made a promise to myself 4 years ago, and I was going to keep it. Marcus saw me first. He was standing with our parents, holding his diploma, smiling for a photo. And then his eyes drifted over my father's shoulder, and he saw me. His smile dropped. His face went pale. He blinked twice, like he was trying to make sure I was real. And then, with a voice that cracked in a way that told me everything I needed to know, he whispered, "Daniel?" My father turned around. My mother turned around. My aunt. My uncle. Everyone. And there I was, standing 5 feet away from the family that had erased me, looking them directly in the eyes, not broken, not begging, standing tall, just like I promised. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like 5 years. My father's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. I could see the machinery spinning behind his expression. Calculation, not emotion. He was assessing, deciding, strategizing, just like always. My mother's hand went to her mouth. I think, and I may be wrong, but I think I saw her eyes water, just for a second, before she blinked it away. And Marcus just stood there, frozen, holding his diploma like a shield. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say anything to my parents. Not yet. I walked straight to Marcus, and I extended the envelope. "This is for you," I said. My voice was steady, calm, the calmest I'd ever been. He looked at the envelope, then at me, then to our father, then back at the envelope. "Open it," I said. Marcus's hands were trembling as he opened the envelope. Inside were two things. The first was a check. A very large check. Enough to cover every single dollar of Marcus's student loan debt. All of it. Every last cent. The debt that I knew, from the one mutual contact I still had been hanging over Marcus's head like a storm cloud. Our father had paid for tuition, yes, but not all of it, and the rest had fallen on Marcus. Loans, interest, pressure. That check wiped it all out. In one moment. Marcus stared at it. His mouth opened, then closed. Then it opened again. He looked up at me with eyes that were filling fast. "Daniel, what? How?" "I built something," I said quietly. "And the first thing I wanted to do with what I earned was make sure you didn't carry that weight." The second item in the envelope was a letter, handwritten, 3 pages. I had spent an entire week writing it, crossing things out, starting over, rewriting, getting it exactly right. The letter didn't bash our parents. It didn't list grievances. It didn't demand apologies. It was a letter from a big brother to his little brother. It said everything I had wanted to say for 4 years. It said, "I'm proud of you." It said, "I never stopped thinking about you." It said, "You were the reason I didn't give up on those nights in my car." Because I kept imagining a moment like this, a moment where I could stand in front of you and show you that following your own path is not a betrayal, it's a birthright. And the letter also included something else, a job offer. A real formal written offer for Marcus to join Ember Creative as a junior project coordinator. Full salary, full benefits, a chance to work alongside his brother and build something meaningful. Marcus read the letter right there, in the middle of that crowded lobby. Tears streamed down his face. And when he finished, he did something I was not prepared for. He hugged me. Not a polite hug. Not a quick pat on the back. He wrapped his arms around me and held on like he was drowning and I was the only solid thing in the ocean. His whole body shook. And for the first time in 4 years, I heard my little brother's voice clearly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't come downstairs that night. I'm sorry I didn't call. I'm sorry. I held him tighter. You were a kid, Marcus. You survived the only way you knew how. I never blamed you. Not for a single second. The crowd around us had gone quiet. People were watching. Some were crying. Some are confused. But the energy in that room had shifted. Something real was happening, and everyone could feel it. And then came the moment I had both dreaded and dreamed about. My father stepped forward. His face was unreadable. That same controlled, calculated mask. He looked at me. I looked at the check in Marcus's hand. I looked at the letter. And then, in a voice just loud enough for us to hear, he said, "Where did you get that kind of money?" Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "How have you been?" Not, "I was wrong." His first words to me in 4 years were about money, about the check. And in that moment, I realized something that I think I had always known, but hadn't been able to admit. My father would never change. He would never see me as his son first. He would always see me as someone to control, or someone who failed his control. There was no in between. I looked at him and said, calmly, clearly, "I built a company, Dad. From nothing. From a car I slept in. From the determination you tried to break. That check is from my own account. My own earnings. From the career you said would leave me begging." I paused. I didn't come here for you. I came here for Marcus. Because somebody in this family should know what unconditional support feels like. The room was silent. My mother let out a small sob. She covered her mouth and turned away. My Aunt Patricia looked at the floor. My Uncle Gene stared at his shoes. And my father? He stood there, rigid, jaw clenched. He didn't apologize. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Doubt. Regret, maybe. Or maybe just the realization that his perfect, controlled world had a crack in it. And that crack was named Daniel. I didn't stay long after that. I said goodbye to Marcus, told him to read the letter again later when he was alone, told him the job offer was real and standing whenever he was ready. No pressure, no deadline, just a door that would always be open. I walked out of that auditorium the same way I walked in, alone. But this time, it felt different. This time, being alone didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. Like I had finally put down a bag of rocks I'd been carrying for 4 years. Marcus called me 2 days later, and it was the first time I'd heard his voice on the phone since I was 20 years old. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about school, about his struggles, about how living under our father's expectations had been slowly suffocating him too. He told me he had wanted to reach out 100 times, but was terrified of what our father would do if he found out. "He told us you were on the streets," Marcus said. "He told us you had failed. He said it was proof that his way was the only way." My stomach turned. My father had lied about me, used me as a cautionary tale, a ghost story to keep Marcus in line. I believed him for a while, Marcus admitted, but something never sat right. I kept looking you up online. I found Ember Creative. I saw your website, your client list, your team. And I knew Dad was wrong. About everything. Marcus accepted the job offer 3 weeks later. He moved to my city. We got dinner every Thursday. We talked. We healed. We rebuilt the brotherhood that had been stolen from us. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. As for my parents, my father never called. Not once. My mother reached out about 6 months later. A short text message. It said, "I think about you every day. I'm sorry I wasn't braver." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't respond right away, not because I was angry, but because I needed to sit with it, to decide what kind of space, if any, I was willing to open for her. Eventually, I wrote back. I said, "I love you, Mom, but love isn't silence. If you ever want to have a real conversation, not behind Dad's back, not in secret, I'll be here." She didn't respond for months, but one day, she showed up at my office, unannounced, with tears in her eyes and a box of old photographs, pictures of me as a baby, as a kid, as a teenager. Pictures she had kept hidden after my father ordered every trace of me removed from the house. We sat in my office and cried together for an hour. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was a start. A small, fragile, terrifying start. And my father? As of today, I have not heard from him. Not a word. Not an apology. Not an acknowledgement. I don't know if I ever will. And I've made peace with that. Because I've learned something that took me years to understand. You cannot wait for people to validate your path. You cannot pause your life hoping that someone who hurt you will wake up one day and say, "I was wrong," because some people never will. Some people will go to their graves clutching their pride like a lifeboat, even as everything sinks around them, and that's their burden, not yours. What I learned from the porch, from the car, from the couch, from the late nights, from the climb, from that graduation lobby, is this. Your worth is not determined by the people who were supposed to love you but didn't. Your worth is determined by what you do when the world tells you you're nothing. Do you believe them, or do you build? I chose to build, not out of spite, although, honestly, spite kept me warm on some of those cold nights in the car. But ultimately, I built it because I believed in something my father never could. I believe that there is more than one way to live a meaningful life. That obedience without love is just control. And that a family built on fear is not a family. It's a prison. And I built something else, too. Something more important than any company or any check. I built a relationship with my brother. A real one. One based on honesty, not hierarchy. One based on support, not surveillance. One based on the simple, radical idea that you can love someone and still let them be who they are. Marcus is thriving at Ember Creative. He found his own talent, project management, client relations, bringing people together. Turns out, he didn't want to be an accountant either. He just never had permission to say it out loud. Now he does. To anyone listening to this who has been disowned, dismissed, discarded by the people who were supposed to be your foundation, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not what they said you are. You are not the lies they told about you. You are not the empty chair at their table. You are the fire they tried to put out. And embers, real embers, don't die. They wait. They glow. And when the time is right, they reignite everything. That graduation day, I didn't just show up with a check and a letter. I showed up with proof. Proof that the boy they threw away became a man they couldn't ignore. Proof that the path they rejected led somewhere extraordinary. Proof that silence is not the same as erasure. You can silence someone's name. You can remove their photos from the wall. You can tell the family they don't exist. But you cannot. You will never erase someone's potential. Not if they refuse to let you. And I refused. I showed up to my brother's graduation with a surprise. But the real surprise wasn't the check. It wasn't a job offer. It wasn't even the letter. The real surprise was me. Standing there. Alive. Successful. Unbroken. That was the thing they never expected. And that was the greatest statement I ever made.